Hey, you're listening to the 52 Weeks podcast. And, we're at the new year, everyone's setting goals. And so, if one of the things that you want to do is become better at public speaking, whether that's going and speaking in front of live audiences, going and being a guest on other podcasts, going and speaking wherever, I brought on an expert to help you out. So, let's meet the one, the only
Leslie Fiorenzo, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay, so Leslie, you really help work with people to give them confidence with speaking. Why do you think that public speaking is one of the greatest fears that people have?
Well, there could be a number of reasons. Sometimes it's because somebody well meaning along the way, like a parent or a teacher, said, "Hey, kid, you're no good at this." And they took it to heart. Or sometimes people get fearful because of something that happened in the past. Maybe they got laughed at in early elementary school or middle school, made fun of when they did a book report or a school play, or something happened that has just stuck with them. The other reason is how our brain works. Number one job of your brain is safety. It's always scanning the environment for danger. And the eyes of an audience could signal danger because your brain hasn't changed much in the hundreds of thousands of years we've been on this planet as humans. And it's thinking back to former times because it's protecting you from danger. So those eyes of an audience are a lot like a warring tribe that's peering out at you from behind the bushes, or a wild animal that's about to eat you. And so when eyes are on you, your brain's saying, "Hey, this is dangerous. Don't do this." So that's part of the reason too.
It's interesting that you mentioned as a young kid, someone says something because you look at kids and they whether it's school programs or whatnot. I mean, there is no fear in a lot of them.
Yes. Yeah,
and,
most.
and so that makes sense that the over the time if someone says something, it sort of becomes stifled. So what's your tips to start speaking? Because I would assume that for people's for speaking thing, if they're just doing this to get out of their comfort zone, it's probably not gonna be 500 people. But if they're wanting to learn how to be a better speaker, what's your tips?
Well, I've created what I call a framework. It's called 5 Steps to Speaking Success. And STEPS is an acronym. And it starts with summoning your inner champion, because we all have that inner critic. Again, it's designed to keep us safe, but we can retrain it so it does a better job. Instead of being that critical voice, it can be a supportive voice. And then it's about tackling obstacles early. So, what gets in your way, and where is it that you want to speak? Is it literally on a stage? So, then it's using the mic and getting on stage. But for many people, it's being an effective leader and leading our team in a way that's encouraging and supportive and gets things done. Or maybe it's simply with a client presentation, and I'm presenting to a group of decision makers at a client, and I want to do a better job. So, what's the obstacle for you? And then engaging and energizing your audience. I don't think anybody shows up to a presentation thinking, "Oh, gee, I hope this is boring." But you and I have sat through a lot of boring presentations, right? And then it's about priming your presence. So, what do you do in the 5 to 7 minutes before you step out in front of the group to help get you focused? I have had many people tell me, "I'm fine agreeing to a presentation. I've got no problem," until the moments before. So I discovered that was a true game changer for people. And then stories. On the steps process is sharing stories that stick, because we remember stories. Facts tell, but stories sell.
I'm in marketing, and sometimes we think as our team that we've relayed how to pitch things and how to talk about it, but then we hear people talking with their clients, and it's like they aren't getting it, and we're like, we've written it, we've spoke it, we've done it in meetings, and so it's like, wait, how did they not understand? But it's like obviously we are not it's in our communication that is not getting out there. So yeah, I love what you're bringing because like at first when I want to talk to you, I was like, oh, this is like if anyone has a goal, but now I'm like, no, it's like everyday life that you really need to learn how to be a better communicator.
I mean, you're presenting to your family at the dinner table about what should we do for spring break or summer vacation, or should we choose this particular program to watch tonight or play this particular game or do this activity. It's all about presenting in a way that gets people on board, that gets people interested, that gets people to lean in and say, "Ooh, I want to know more about."
Yeah, exactly. And because I like to get more into like the nitty gritty of things, can we go through those steps again? So starting with the first one.
Sure. So we all what the first one is summon your inner champion because we all have a critical voice and that voice says some things to us that boy, if we said those things to our best friend, probably wouldn't be our best friend anymore. So we really have to pay attention and then change it. So in my coaching practice, I have a process that I take people through and I encourage them to make an image of this critic. Like, what does that critic look like? What's it saying? So then, what am I going to replace it? And the other thing I tell people is thank your critic for doing its job because it thinks it's doing a great job. It doesn't know any better. So, hey, thank you. I appreciate that. Here's what I need instead. So instead of saying, nobody's going to listen to you, say, you know what? I'm learning and I'm growing. And what I have to say, my audience values, and people are interested in my opinion. So could you say that? You make an agreement and get it to see things in a different light. Now, this takes some work. We know our the pathways in our brain are pretty well cemented in there. My coach describes it as a superhighway. So you're going down this superhighway. You've driven this superhighway your entire life, most likely. And if you want to make a change, if you want to tell that critical voice, you know what, I need you to do it this way instead. Well, it's going to be like a gravel road. And we all know what happens when a gravel road's bumpy and it's like weird. And I don't want to be on this gravel road. It's more comfortable to go back to the superhighway. And I love what you said earlier about getting out of our comfort zone because that's what we need to do. To summon that voice of the inner champion, we need to pay attention to that critical voice and say, hey, this isn't helpful. What do I need to be saying instead? So I'm a big believer in creating affirmations, or you might call it a mantra, but whatever positive information, if you could see my office, you'd see I've got all kinds of sticky notes around to remind myself about those positive things that I want to keep in front of me. It's about keeping it in front of you and creating those new roads so that your voice of your inner champion becomes the super highway. But it's not going to happen overnight. They say change takes 21 days. Well, that's a start. 21 days get it's a good base, but it really takes 80 or 90 days before something gets cemented and it gets to be repetitive and can start making that groove, can start becoming that super highway.
So, for example, if someone was wanting to be better at communicating at work, I like how you said, or even speak up and share their ideas. So it's just like reaffirming that to yourself of, okay, like I got this. My ideas are worth hearing. You know, I have value to the company. Is that like what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah. So I told an audience on Thursday morning that I spoke to, I said, the next time you look in the mirror, look yourself in the eye and say, you are an amazing human being. Because in fact, you are. There's only one person that's ever going to have your genetic makeup, ever. There's only one person that's going to have the iris of your eyes, the inside of your ear, your fingerprints, your taste buds. All of those things are unique to every individual. And so your genetic makeup, nobody else in the entire history of the world, prior or going forward, is ever going to be exactly like you. So that's pretty amazing. And the chances of you being you are 1 in 400 billion. You know, to have the genetic makeup from your mom and your dad is so unique, and we just discount it so much. We don't appreciate that. So look in the mirror and say, "Hey, you are so cool. You're so amazing. You've got it going on, and you can do this." You can do whatever it is in front of you because the challenge you were given was put there for you. And you have the resources, whether or not you want to dig deep and uncover them. But I just truly believe that each one of us was given this purpose, and it's our job to uncover it, discover it, whatever term you want, but to move it forward.
You were saying that like it's powerful. It's powerful when you think about that, even from like genetic standpoint, like the science standpoint of it. But then I like how often we just are damning ourselves. Like, cause as you were saying everything, I was like, yeah, we should be kinder to ourselves.
Because if think about it, if you said those things to your best friend that you often say to yourself, your friend would say, "Well, why are you talking to me like that? That's not helpful." And so treating yourself with the same compassion you would for your very best friend. Because if your best friend comes to you and says, "Steph, I got this issue going on," you're going to be supportive, you're going to be helpful, you're going to listen, and so we need to do that same thing for ourselves. We beat ourselves up so easily because we live inside our heads.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, has this always been something that was easy for you, or have you
No, it's taken me a long time. I mean, I thought I was natural and gifted, and I learned the hard way that I wasn't. And it takes practice, it takes some work. And I remember early in my career having to learn a program that we presented on a very regular basis to our clients and watching my boss give the program. Now, this was before PowerPoint. We had flip charts. I mean, you could take a class to learn how to design a great flip chart back in the day. So that's where I started. And I remember thinking as I was taking copious notes, listening to her over and over, thinking, how am I ever going to do this? And now, a lot of years later, it's routine, it's natural, and those words have become memorized.
think that is cool that you said now it's routine and it's become memorized, so it's become a part of you. Because I think that like sometimes like affirmations or looking at yourself in the mirror and like Mel Robbins would say high five. It seems
Yeah.
so small, right? But it really does have a effect. Like I'm listening to every morning. I did an affirmation for like my quarter one goals, just sort of describing what I want to feel like at the end of the quarter and like why I'm doing everything. And that's one of my like dailies that I need to do is listen to the affirmations. I mean, to listen to that audio every day. And it is powerful of because it's so quick to forget, you know? And even in it, I'm like, there's days that you're going to be tired and then you're going to want to give up. We aren't giving up this quarter. Like, we're pushing through, you know?
Yeah. Well, I've set mine to music. I've used an AI tool, and it's just something I play when I'm getting ready in the morning.
Oh, nice. That's a good idea to add music to it.
Yeah, because we can remember the tune, right? It's creating that memory and something that we're going to, like, put on autoplay. Because those negative voices come up so easily, and so we want
Yeah.
something that goes on autoplay that's encouraging, that will help us move forward, that will get us excited, that will, and I love Mel Robbins' idea of a high five because we don't often do that. We do the opposite.
No. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's dive into the next step. So with a T, remind me what it was?
So, tackle obstacles early. So, thinking about what gets in your way. I worked with a client, and one of the things that got in her way was she was often asked to deliver the department message in her boss's place. And I don't know, I don't remember. It was one of the C suite members. I don't think it was the president of the company, but somebody would be in the back of the room kind of scowling. And she just felt like that scowl was for her. And I said, "What evidence do you have that that's the case?" And I said, "Pay attention to how he looks at other people. And is it really just you?" And she came to realize that was just his thinking face. He just scowled. That was his face in meetings, right? It wasn't anything that she needed to take personally or that she should take to heart or anything. And so we make up stories all the time. And so the question is it true? How do I know it's true? And what gets in my way? I know I've seen a lot of people when they're offered the microphone, "Oh, I can project." Yes, of course you can. But first of all, save your voice. Your voice is the microphone's there to amplify. The microphone is also there so that someone who's hearing impaired or needs a little help hearing, it's a tool for them too. So think of it like your audience. They want to hear you, so a microphone helps you be heard. So those are just a couple of things that might get in. But what is your obstacle? Maybe it's the setup of the room, or maybe it's thinking that, oh, nobody wants to hear from me. I'm just a whatever my title or position is. Yeah, they do. And if your role wasn't important to the company, it wouldn't be there. So you're important, and what you have to offer and what you have to say is important. So if you're called on, share. So tackle obstacles early and then energizing and engaging your audience. And it's hard to do without energizing and engaging yourself. So that's the first thing we need to think about is how am I entering this room? Because I believe energy is contagious. And you've
Yes.
probably been in meetings at an office or seen people that if they're just kind of grumpy and down in the dumps and that energy is contagious. But if I come in and I'm excited to be there and I'm thinking this is going to be great and we're going to share some information and we've got so much we can do and will be amazing, just flip the script and think about how you can share that information. Long time ago, I worked with a speakers bureau and his favorite word was edutain. He wanted speakers to educate, but also be entertaining because that's our expectation. And the other thing that we have now that we didn't have 20, 30 years ago, well, the internet and AI and all the things, but specifically these quick, short videos. Everything has got to be instant. We expect it now. And so that can be a challenge that we need to face in presenting material because people want, like, what's the point? Get to the point. Let's hurry up. Sometimes that's not possible. We need to take a step back. Anyway, so that's energizing and engaging. And then I talked earlier about priming your presence. But the three things you need to do before you step in front of the group are a breath work practice, a powerful mantra. So, whatever it is, I've got this. My audience wants to hear from me, something that's affirming, and a power pose or power posture. So standing, feet flat on the floor, shoulders back, maybe hands on your hips like Wonder Woman. Maybe it's like Superman, you're flying through the air, you're going to break the tape with a race. Maybe it's the Heisman Trophy position. I've got a lot of guys that like that if they're football fans, right? Whatever it is that makes you feel powerful. But anytime you're in front of a group, feet flat on the floor, bring the power of the earth down, up and through you and out into your audience. When I'm hopping from one foot to the I've seen people do this all the time, or when I'm pacing back and forth, I'm letting that nervous energy, I want to corral that. So standing with my feet planted. Now, it doesn't mean I don't move, but move with purpose. And you don't even have to take a step. You can lean in as opposed to pacing back and forth.
I want to pause you right here and dive into these three ones because I do feel like, taking that breath before, because those of you listening, I was like 2 minutes late to this. And then, of course, everything wasn't working. And I switched from my phone to my computer. And it's like frazzled energy, right? Compared to when you're like ready to go and calm and like how you greet someone. Cause that's what I always tell podcasters on like the first 10 seconds, like how you greet someone. You don't know if it's their first or 100th episode. And I feel like the same with, especially when you're either going into a presentation for a company or a big speaking event, like, yeah, to feel like grounded. Cause even as you're like, put your feet on the ground, I did that just barely. And I was like, oh, that does make a difference. 'Cause you were up. I was like, instantly, I saw my posture get better and everything. And it like, I want to go back to the barrier. What's the word for it though?
Obstacles?
Obstacles. Yes. So, like, one of my obstacles that I have with doing more speaking stuff is that I use a lot of filler words. And in podcasting, I feel like it's made it worse because I can edit all that. And then I'm afraid to like speak if I'm not using it. And just barely, I'm in my head because I just said like, and then I'm trying not to say it. And so it makes me not have as much energy and not be as authentic, but I also know that someone doesn't want to always listen to someone using filler words every few words. So what's your advice with filler words and how to overcome that?
Having someone point them out can be helpful. My dad would always say, I had a habit as a teenager to end most every sentence with, you know, and he'd say, no, Leslie, I don't know. And that cured me. So if you have a partner or a best friend or a coworker or someone who's willing to just give you some pointers or point it out to you, you can do that for yourself. The things I've learned, and it's something I still want to break, as I've recorded video for my YouTube channel, I start a lot of sentences with so. You're right. When you're editing things, you can edit that out. But when
Yeah.
you're live and in person, you're not able to do that. Learning to use pauses effectively. So if I'm paying attention and I hear myself say the word like or as you know or and or whatever your is, taking a pause. Doesn't have to be long, but there's power in a pause. And sometimes when we're nervous or anxious or we're not sure our message is landing, we might have a tendency to rush. And I do that. And I get in a hurry and I talk really fast and I trip over my words. Just take a breath. And I also wanted to add something about breathing because when we're anxious, we breathe very shallowly. But when we're relaxed, we can take breaths deeply and into our diaphragm. So that's why I say when you are priming your presence, a breathing technique is really effective. And it could be breathing into the count of 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4 counts, and then holding your exhale. That's kind of my go-to. But there's at least dozens, probably hundreds of different ways you can breathe and breathing techniques that you can use. So I just tell people find one that you like that you'll use all the time.
And I think that what you said there with the pause, exactly. Like editing, I don't have to have anyone point out my filler words. I see them all. And there's a tally where it says how many I use. So that gets me more in my head. Where I used to, speak at different like podcasting networking things, and I wouldn't be. It would just be like, oh, it is what it is. And now I feel like I've gotten a little nervous to speak in public because of all my filler words. But exactly what you said, that pause, because right there, I was about to use a filler word and I just slowed down, sort of paused. So it does help. And it's something so simple, just like the telling yourself that you love yourself in the mirror and whatnot. But it's easy to get going and not pause.
And I would just tell people, even professionals, you hear newscasters occasionally put in a or and. When you're prepared and when you know where you're going, it's a lot easier to cut out those filler words. But if you haven't given it any thought, and I see this a lot at networking events. I'm a big networker, and especially in person. And I can tell the people who've given some thought to what they're going to say about themselves, how they're going to introduce themselves beforehand, and the people who show up and just start talking. Because their intro is most likely filled with ums and ands and ers and ahs and a lot of filler words.
Interesting even with the intro, but I get it because the other day I was thinking, okay, like what's my 30-second elevator pitch for teaching women how to podcast, right? And I was like going through on a notebook trying to whittle it down, and I still don't have exactly what I want, but it is I think that speaking in a shorter amount of time sometimes is harder than if you have 5 minutes to share. Like if you're just trying to get your message in 30 seconds. Do you feel that way? Or
Yes. Well, because I have to be purposeful about it, and every word counts in 30 seconds. One of the formats that I suggest to people is how, and then you ask a question that's something related to your industry. What I do is, so how public speaking is the number one fear most people have? Well, what I do is help them get confident and comfortable and change from timid to triumphant when they stand in front of a group.
that doesn't sound salesy, that just sounds fact.
And so that's
That's great.
what you wanna do. So if and I'm trying to think of, I don't know enough about the podcasting industry to make something up on the fly, but what would you say is a fallacy or something that's a myth about podcasting?
Well, my big thing is like, so like, how there's just not as many women podcasting as men. Like, I help women spend less time on admin and more time behind the mic or something along that line. So I feel like that transitions really well with that.
Because what you want people to do is say, "So, Steph, how do you do that?" Or, "Steph, maybe that's me. We should talk about that," or, "I'd love to have a conversation. I'd love to learn more." Because when I introduce myself I'm the founder and CEO of Business Speaking Solutions, who cares? People listen to things with the focus on what's in it for them. I always say everybody's favorite radio station is WIIFM. What's in it for me? Because that's how we listen. What can you do for me?
This is so true. I love all these little tips. That's why I wanted to, before you explained all this like really well, but I was like, okay, let's dive a little bit deeper into it. So before we move on to stories, any other tips or tricks with those three to share?
Practice them. Find what works and what's comfortable for you. We did talk about getting out of our comfort zone, but that priming your presence to me is something that's familiar and comfortable for you to use and that you will call on anytime you step before a group. So you're heading to a in person networking event, you're in your car. It's hard to do a standing pose in your car, but you can do your breathing technique and your mantra for sure. Or I enter any kind of virtual platform, I'm going to do those things before I show up on that call. They're in my memory, so to speak. They're something I just know at the heart, and I do them that becomes automatic. Yeah.
Instead of doing like the business pitch for yourself or whatnot, you could switch it with different topics, I would assume.
Yeah. I mean, what's your favorite food? Favorite movie? Why is it your favorite movie? What's a great book you've read lately? What's a takeaway? If you could travel, money was no object, where would you go? All those kinds of things. Just thinking about what are some things that I could say that would create curiosity.
Create curiosity. That's great. Okay, so with that, let's go into the stories because I agree with you. I am constantly telling my guests, especially that I do for work, which is about real estate. I'm like, you need to come with stories. You need to come with examples of, if you're talking about first time buyers, okay, let's talk about these different examples of how people were able to get a house when they didn't think it was possible or whatnot. Because that really is, especially when it's topics that are like real estate, it can seem so overwhelming for someone because there's all these nuances. I think that stories just help you remember, oh, you know what? The end result, they got it. They were good.
Well, we remember stories. Chances are very few of us, I feel like, are remembering numbers or data. And while it's important and it's helpful, we want to tell a story. So you mentioned the first time home buyer. How did you help somebody? My dad sold real estate. And as he said, there's three things you need to remember: location, location, location. That was his mantra. It didn't matter. And always buy the worst house in the best neighborhood. That was another thing he always said. And we all have stories. And the other thing I tell people is a story just needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. It doesn't have to be lengthy. I learned the keyboard on a typewriter. I took typing in high school. And one of the sentences that we always practiced was the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog because it had every letter in the alphabet, in the English alphabet. Learned to type in English. But that's also a story. It created an image, at least I hope it did, an image of a dog or a fox jumping over a dog, right? So that's a story. It can be really short and sweet.
Yeah, and, like, I just barely published my 1,000th episode, and when I go back, guess that I couldn't remember, it's because they didn't share stories. But everyone who did share something, like, personal, I can remember that even though it was almost a decade ago, what
Yeah.
they shared.
Yeah. And so the other thing to think about is what I tell people when you're creating a story is your opening line or your hook, your what's going to generate interest or curiosity. So what are you going to say at the beginning? And then what are you going to say at the end? What do you want people to do? What's your call to action? What do you want to leave them with? Or how do you want to leave them feeling? So beginning and end, and then fill in the middle. So what's your core point? What is it that falls in between that opening and that closing? So to me, that's a great way to create a story. Now, there's all kinds of formats that you can use, but I think that's really simple and gives you a way to, even in your 60-second intro, right? Or 30-second intro, what's your opening? What are you going to start with? What's your call to action at the end? And what are you going to say in between?
And I love the formula for it. So, can you give us an example of a story that you often share?
Well, when I talk about people that I've worked with, one of my early clients, he came to me because he had the opportunity to present at his national conference. He owned a business and the franchise or owner had kept asking him because he was very successful and he kept turning him down. And the reason he kept turning him down was his knees would literally knock together when he stood up before a group. And what we found out was part of the reason was he was made fun of at a book report in like 5th or 6th grade, right? And he doesn't even know if for sure the kids were laughing at him or there was a class clown that was in the back of the room. If the kid, that middle school kids are interesting bunches of people. So we have to take what happens with a grain of salt and not take it to heart. But he had for years. So we worked to eliminate that voice that said, hey, you're going to make this same mistake again and people are going to laugh at you again, to get him to deliver that presentation with confidence.
The drama sticks with us, but also in business, yeah, your knees knocking together, that doesn't look confident. That doesn't look like you can take on the project.
Yeah.
So then he was able to overcome it.
Yes. Yep. So and we followed my process and he worked and he worked. I mean, this isn't something you just it's not like I wish I had a magic wand. I don't. I don't know that they exist. We can have fun with that and there are some things that happen magically and when we think about the world and how it works, but mostly it's doing the work. It's putting in the reps. Right? I think Muhammad Ali had a saying about that, people don't see the early mornings. They don't see all of the road work that goes into winning a championship. They just see you in the bright lights and, ooh, this person's a champion. They don't see the work that it takes to get there.
That's why, like, I like to be able to talk to people about whatever topic it is and like break it down a little bit more. Because you do see, like, this isn't most stuff doesn't happen overnight, exactly what you were saying. So, well, in wrapping up, I like to have the guests leave us with a challenge for me and the listeners. So it could be something that we're doing for 7 days, for one day, whatever you want. But can you give us a challenge for the week?
My challenge to you is What are you going to do to prime your presence? What's your breathing technique, your mantra, and your power pose? And what are you going to do this week?
Well, that's really good to have that challenge, Leslie, of okay, going through those steps, what am I going to do so that then I'm prepared? So thank you, Leslie. And to those of you who have joined this conversation, I just am so grateful that you guys push play and you join in. And I hope that whatever your goals are and being a better speaker and being a better communicator, that you will be able to reach them. And just remember that those dreams you have today can be the reality tomorrow with just the simple things you do. And I'll catch you guys next Monday.